All right, welcome to This Is Podcasting. I'm your host, Connor, and I have my co-host, Jaden, and former guest, Calvin.
Coming back.
Right, that's great. And we are talking about Sicario, which is another film in our auteur series on Denis Villeneuve.
Yes, Denis Villeneuve.
That is a way to pronounce it.
Yeah, so sometimes I look at the pronunciations of like different names like on YouTube and like give you the option like, would you like to hear the American one or the actual one? And there was like, and the one for like English was like Denis Villeneuve, and I was like, you're not even trying.
Yeah.
No, I try to be accurate on it.
I think it's respectful to the person. Like if they're gonna pronounce it like people that come here that are like I had a friend in high school. His name was Gianmaria. He's Italian. It was Gianmaria, but like yeah, sure, we'll call it Gianmaria. I don't know why, but like
Because Americans are stupid.
Yeah, so we'll just I think it's just respectful to like the person and the culture that they're coming from. The language is a part of it. So
But I always think it's funny. So.
Yeah, like my name is Connor, and if a C is pronounced differently in a different language, it doesn't change my name. My name is Connor. It doesn't become something else.
I mean, your mom calls me Yaden.
Yeah, that's kind of a funny thing.
Yeah, which is funny because I call
right though.
Yeah, because like we'll go to a Mexican restaurant. Like I'll have the Vegeta nachos.
God damn it! we're talking about being respectful to the pronunciation, and here you are saying Vegeta nachos. All right, so just some of the stats on Sicario. This came out in 2015. It had a box office of 84 million, 84.9. We'll just round it up to 85, you know? It had a budget of 30 million, and I find that really interesting. It had a lower budget than Prisoners, which is the last Denis Villeneuve film.
Really?
Yeah, that one had a budget of 46 million. Here's my theory on it. You have Hugh Jackman in that film, who is at the height, like I think I talked about, that's peak Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
Like that is... He's either they were filming or had already finished filming X-Men 3, Rise of the Dark Phoenix, Ultimate Phoenix, whichever Phoenix movie it is. You're making a face.
The movie came out in 2006.
Oh, no.
I think you're talking about Days of Future Past.
That's the one I'm talking about. Okay. Isn't there a Phoenix
Which
in
is
that one?
also, by the way, that's actually X-Men 2.
Is there a Phoenix
But
in that
also
one?
X-Men 5.
of the reboot.
It's confusing.
Yes.
I'm just saying either way, peak Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
I mean, is there ever not peak Hugh Jackman? He's basically been a household name for the last 20 years.
He's been at the top of his game since day one.
Yeah.
But that's what I think. That's where I think
Wolverine.
that's where I think the discrepancy in the budget comes from. Is 46 million for Prisoners, which stars Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal, who are mega stars, and then Sicario stars Emily Blunt and Josh Brolin, who are not household names the same
Thanos
way.
yet.
Yeah, but I'd imagine they still command the same salary.
I doubt that.
I don't think that.
Yeah, because I think Emily Blunt, especially. I mean, A Quiet Place now.
This is
Devil
before,
This is
Wears
before
Prada.
that.
I know, but like because this was leading up into it. Like she is that kind of name.
I think for now, because she's on that what is that Disney thing? Jungle Cruise, yeah.
Yeah, we were supposed to do a review on that one.
Yeah,
Were we?
Yeah, we talked about it.
Oh, yeah,
we just never watched the
that's
movie.
Right. I didn't go back inside.
Yeah, I fell asleep on the floor.
Yeah. Again, that was another one at my birthday party. We keep bringing up my birthday. I love it. That was a great night.
That was great.
But yeah, so that was just an interesting bit about it. I think at the time, Emily Blunt, Josh Brolin don't command the same salary as Hugh Jackman and probably Jake Gyllenhaal. So
Probably, but
I think that's kind of the
I wouldn't think
discrepancy in
that's
the
the
budget.
difference in the budget. I think the biggest difference is probably the runtime, because you're talking about editing a lot more film. You're talking about more data, having to work with through editing and all of that. It's just more man hours required in the post production.
But this one has like a couple kind of action-packed scenes that require like an amount of special effects, and so I kind of thought that would drive the budget of this up more. So
you're
I'm
also
just saying,
talking
I'm
about
surprised
like
by it.
well, and you also have to think about like leasing like certain properties.
That's what I was thinking, because like Hugh Jackman does work like on that house,
Yeah,
and there's like they are in one house in this one, multiple houses. Oh no, there's more properties in this movie.
but they're not really set there where they are probably going to need to do multiple days of shooting.
Yeah.
Whereas
I'm just
I
saying,
think
we're
this
just
one-
gonna blow this place up.
yeah.
Sicario has at least 6 more black SUVs than Prisoners does. That's got to cost a lot.
I think that maybe,
But
there's a couple black SUVs in Prisoners.
But yeah. So, anyways, Calvin, Calvin, what are your first impressions of this film?
So, I mean, the war films aren't like my favorite because they're often, about pew pew floaty things, and that gets tired because people, they actually do live in places like this, so where war is daily life. So it's one thing to show things as they are, and another to use the misfortune of others as a device to get butts in seats. I think that's a little cynical of our entertainment enterprise. So, and so many of these films have been made about the drug wars, so it's easier just to pan them all than to watch one hoping it isn't bullshit. So it's not like I went into this thinking like, oh yeah, this could be better than the other ones. I don't know. I mean, this is. I didn't have high hopes, but it's good for the action thriller genre, but it doesn't really say enough to justify its violence.
Okay, no.
I typically love pew pew splitty things. So first time I watched this movie, I loved it. I'm still very fond of it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I love the action in it. I like the story. The characters kind of I'm indifferent about, but yeah, big fan of this movie.
I think it's interesting that you both bring up the action, because I think this is actually more subtle in terms of action. This is not. I wrote a note about this. I imagine this movie in the hands of Michael Bay, and it just makes me want to roll my eyes and like walk out. Like,
yeah,
this movie is like, I think Calvin said, it's a smart version, which I think is kind of a theme. I think what Denis Villeneuve come to realize is he has this way of kind of elevating a genre film above what it probably should be. I like how kind of eager this film is to not waste your time. I think everything in it is kind of necessary, and adding more would have wasted time. It would have made it more bloated. I think it's, like I said, I think it's subtle in a way, even though there are like good action set pieces in it. And I think it has a great payoff at the end, which I love setup and payoff. I am a big fan of this film as well.
Yeah. There's only one splody, so yeah, it is.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more of like a visual motif. Like it's not a part of it, but it's the background.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So, and I think that goes back to the way he's treated the environment as being like an extension of the mood of the atmosphere, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. You're talking about like that scene at night, or it's becoming nighttime, and they're looking into Juarez.
Yeah,
like
you want to
from
see
the other
fireworks.
side of the border. Yeah, I think that's great. You see all like the tracers and the explosion, and then Emily Blunt's character, Kate Macer, she's just like, oh my god, like this is what it's like. But I think that kind of plays into what Calvin said. There's maybe an exploitative portion of this film, whereas like we kind of have this perception of what we think south of the border is.
I just think that
I think they kind of play that up a bit.
It's hard to not exploitate things in film.
Yeah.
And just in making money in general. So.
I think if I was Mexican and I watched this, I would maybe not be so stoked about how this
that's
is kind
actually
of the portrayal or perception of what it could be. It could be perceived as like, wow, this must be what Americans think all of Mexico is, and that's not true.
Well, and that's actually something that the mayor of Juarez had an issue with. He wanted everyone to boycott the film because at the time of filming, they had, in his mind at least, I don't know to the truth of this, but that they had made large strides in increasing the safety of Juarez. Like this was not the picture that Juarez was anymore.
Right.
So I think I agree. Like it's a little bit like this is our idea of Juarez and the drug war, and not necessarily the state of things now.
I mean, I do have a friend from Juarez. His name is Julio. Shout out. He says it's pretty fucking bad. So
I'm not
goes
saying
down
that
there
it's
all
not
the time.
good.
Still, yeah.
I wouldn't say it's good, but I mean the thing is, it's like
I don't think he's never said anything about like people like hanging in the street or anything like that. But
Right.
as far as the drug environment, there is still very.
I think the
still
issue
very
probably
present.
comes up where I think the majority of films that people watch that take place in Mexico or South America are usually some kind of drug fueled quarrel.
Yeah.
And so like that's the only picture like kind of Americans get of those areas. So
Like, literally every single movie.
yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot of yellow tint in this movie, so that's nice.
Yeah, and I think
Denis Villeneuve opened up his palette a bit for this one.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say. I think this is more like because you're right. In Enemy, you had that more sepia yellow, well, not quite sepia, but that more yellow tone,
Yeah.
and then everything was like dark or white in Prisoners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then here you have slightly desaturated colors. but you don't have the stereotypical like let's just throw
The whole
a
take
filter
over
on
mix
it,
of it,
yeah, and just call it
Which is interesting because that would be typical of a film like this, to where if it's,
Yeah.
it's taking place in hot southern, South America, you know,
Yeah.
so, or Central America,
So
so
like in Texas,
like that would make
perfectly American air.
Yeah.
and
Did you?
just, like,
yeah, that's
across
actually
the
like,
border.
yeah, that's actually what happens when you cross the northern border of Texas, and suddenly like you look like you're wearing sunglasses.
But that's a part of Enemy that I think is interesting, is to use that color palette to
Yeah.
kind of change the mood of that film. And I think it's nice that this one kind of isn't trying to influence anything by like its color palette, I don't think, which is, I think it's a interesting, or not interesting, but I think it's cool to see kind of the range that he has as a director, how he chooses to put things together. And so it's cool to see that there are different kind of bits in his films.
Yeah, and I do like here, like especially like you get another sense of the Denis thumbprint or fingerprint, like with his characters. Another great example of him creating characters or giving space to characters, and they build up from there into
Right.
very real and organic things.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about Emily Blunt's character then?
Yeah. Miss Macer.
Yeah, Jane, what do you think of her?
I mean, honestly, like I'm a big Emily Blunt fan, but I think her character in this is kind of boring. She doesn't know how to smoke a cigarette. She like lights one half-ass kind of in one scene, and then like it's not smoking, and then she just like, continues to hit it, but there's no fucking smoke.
What did you say? You think that Emily Blunt just doesn't want to smoke?
I think she just doesn't want to smoke cigarettes, and I'm like, then just don't make the character smoke. It's not like it's adding anything
Yeah.
to her character. So it was
Well,
silly.
I think it's supposed to kind of convey the
Like stress.
anxiety and stress that
Yeah.
she's going through, and so it's like she doesn't usually smoke, but now that she's thrown into this kind of hole,
Yeah, because she's always asking for one too. It's not like she has her own cigarette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That
but
to
she
me
should
is-
still know that if it's like lit or not.
Yeah. But yeah, like I think she plays like the perfect amount of understated blandness of like a regular flawed person, and then like at the same time switching to like an indignant idealist whose apprehension of the nature of the mission like pushes her towards her vices. So I think all of those things work for those reasons. Like she's not meant to be compelling or engaging. It's so real, like how a very boring person who's divorced and only cares about the job now would act. So I think while you could script that, she also gives it a life in that wasn't necessarily there,
Right.
in ways that like other films, like you could have, they would feel like stocky and like this isn't how normal people act. But she has just a certain way of cadence of delivering her lines that like, oh, this is a real person.
Yeah. I'm kind of with Jaden. I'm not particularly blown away by this performance, but I think she brings to the story like what the story needs, because I don't think, when we talked about Prisoners, I think that movie is about the characters. That is the characters just kind of living in this environment, but what we're focused on are the characters. I think it's kind of the opposite in this film. I think it's all about the situation that they're in, and that's kind of what really is driving the story, and they are kind of along the ride with it. So I think
That
she
makes sense, especially her character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think she emotes this like kind of apprehension and anxiety because she's always kept at like arm's length of like the actual mission. She's kept in the dark all the time. And I think she does a good job showing that like perturbation, like this like kind of idea of like anxiety and not knowing what's going on. And so I find that part of her character compelling. But that's kind of all there is to her character, is like kind of this sense of anxiety and going into the unknown. But again, like I said, I think this is a really tight script, and I think everything that's in it is all that needs to be in it. And so you don't need to elaborate on her character much more than this. So I'm actually fine with it kind of not being this over-the-top performance like you get out of like Hugh Jackman or Jake Gyllenhaal in Prisoners, because to me the characters are not like the most important thing in this film.
Yeah, and like, I still think she does a good job. And I think
Yeah,
it fits with
yeah.
the story. It's just that she is a boring character.
Yeah, and she's also not the one that like it's told from her perspective in the beginning, but I think that but I think that's you're meant to take it from her perspective because that's where all of the confusion comes from. We're not told anything about the mission, all of this. It's from her perspective because we have the same amount of information as she does.
Yeah.
But then when you and then when you back out like and get the wider scope of things, it's really about Alejandro Geek, like that I think the reflection of how they treat everything going on in Juarez is his perspective.
Okay.
All right, and one of the things I like about Emily Blunt's character in this is I think you can kind of draw some comparisons between Macer and Helen from Enemy, where I think Helen in that movie is supposed to be kind of the viewer's perspective, kind of entering into this film, and I think that's sort of how I felt watching this movie. Is we're also, as the audience, we're not let in on what's going on. Like Josh Brolin's character and Benicio del Toro's character are very, kind of they like I said, they keep Mesa in the dark. And I think that's how we're also, as the audience, like we don't know what's going on either. It's not like we got some scene on the side where like Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro are like explaining the story to us, and she's left in the dark. Like we're in the dark as much as she is.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of an interesting thing that I at least I assume is probably something that Denis Villeneuve does on purpose, where he kind of wants some character in the film that the audience can relate to and latch on to and be like, we're experiencing this the same way the character is.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think is interesting about Macer's character in this, and I think it's another thing that's really interesting about Helen's character in Enemy. So I kind of like that comparison between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily, though, that he's trying to get it from a single person's perspective so we agree with them. I think it's a terrible thing that the genre film of action thriller does all the time, the over-explanation of everything. What he's trying to do is... It's this whole movie is a mood piece. It's all about the way everything feels, and so to create that, you have to make sure that she doesn't know anything. She has a sense of what they're doing, but not necessarily its purpose, or even necessarily like what they're actually doing at all. They don't even tell her what the mission is when they get down there. They walk into a meeting, the number of meetings they walk to in the middle of, or the number of like debriefings they walk to.
Or the part where she's literally left outside of the meeting and then brought in and then taken out and then brought in again. Like, okay, you get to know these small details.
Yeah, like it's all on purpose to give you that sense, but it's... Yeah, I have other problems with that, but that's really why.
To me, that's something I enjoyed about the film. Is I was
I do. Like, I think that's what, like, it's good to do it that way, but the thing is it also kind of, it holds back in other ways, and I'll explain that later.
All right, what do we think about Josh Brolin's character Matt?
Fucking douchebag.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I do not like him at all. Put on a shirt. Why are you not wearing a shirt in that scene? What is going on there?
I like to think about him as I look at him. He's this very devil may care character, and he's the kind of guy who's somehow always chewing gum. Somehow,
Or wearing flip-flops.
Yeah, why is he wearing flip-flops?
I love how they looked at that too, like, check out this guy, he's quirky and weird.
Yeah. He's just chilling.
So bringing my own perspective from being in the military, and you have like your regular guys in the military, which is what I was. I was just a regular guy. And then you have like your really cool like operators, like your SEALs and your EOD and your rescue swimmer, like these cool guys, and they kind of play by different rules. And so like you can, like when I was on base, you notice these guys, like, because we're all in uniform and stuff, and in the middle of the day they're walking around in like flip-flops, and they it's no big deal. Like
I could see Kiefer doing that.
Yeah, they go by their own rules, So seeing him, Matt, in like flip-flops, and he's this consultant that the FBI has brought in, and he's like high up on the list of important people in like this sort of this drug war, And so to me, watching it, I was like, okay, I kind of get that. Like, it makes sense that he would be kind of blah, like I said, devil may care kind of character, because that's kind of how it is when you look at these guys. I mean, I think this movie also does a good job of kind of not playing that up too much. I think you get like these like act of valor movies where it's like Navy SEALs, and they're like the heroes of America, and they're somehow like this kind of otherworldly being that like exists only to like kill people, and they're a machine of war, whatever. But if you like have met some of these guys, they're just people. They're just better at killing people than you are. That's all.
Yeah.
So I like that this movie kind of didn't try to go too over the top and be like, let's make Josh Brolin the biggest badass that's ever lived. I like that he's just kind of a guy.
Yeah.
And I think that fits this character well, and I like it's kind of subtle. It's pretty understated, and I was really happy that it wasn't like he's pulling out like dual wielding pistols and like no looking like around corners and shooting guys in the head. I like that this is like, it seemed like tactically sound how they go about everything, and it all seemed to kind of make sense that all like kind of the action set pieces that take place, they all just seem like kind of guys, but they're also just like very well trained, which is kind of how it is in real life. So
Yeah.
I like that this
Make
movie
you, like, not a person.
Yeah, I like that this movie didn't do over the top war thing. That's one of my
Yeah.
big like praises I can give this film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they created like a nuanced bro, that he projects apathy but also diligence. But his entire nihilistic attitude is a reflection of the atmosphere. It's just another layer of it. It's not necessarily, he is more of an archetype in that sense, but he's a real person also, which is so cool to see. Like that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
Like to create as someone writing a script or making a movie that a character can function in both of those ways.
So Alejandro Gillick, is that how you pronounce it?
A geek.
Geek.
Because it's a double L.
Okay.
Yeah, we all know that rule.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's also not mentioned in the film, so you just call him Ali.
Okay. Well, I'll call him. He's a dick. I also I think all of the actors do good, and I think it fits with the movie. But personally, I don't like these people who they're portraying. I don't like Alejandro. I think he's a bad person, and I think he uses an excuse from his past to justify him being an awful human being.
Well, I think Macer hits on that a lot. She's like,
Yeah.
"Who is this guy? What is he about?" And
Yeah.
he just Matt keeps saying, "Oh, he's a consultant, same as me." And she's
Yeah.
like, "No, he's not.
Yeah,
no, he's
there's something
not."
wrong with him.
And it gets revealed later that of course
It does,
Of course,
yeah.
he's not just some kind of a consultant brought in.
Yeah. No, I don't like he's a very good actor and stuff, and the character is amazing, but just personally, I don't like the dude.
Yeah,
I don't
I
like
think
him.
and I think he's really cool. He's kind of like a slow burn for the whole film. We start with Macer's perspective. We get basically slapped in the face with Matt Graver's perspective on everything, and then
Right.
we ultimately realize that the whole movie is really about Alejandro. And so, it's the whole thing is his inner turmoil raging quietly below the surface while we're paying attention to all of these other things, and then suddenly we get to the end and we realize the entire movie is from his perspective, the state of things, why everyone thinks this, because they're all a part of it in the same way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's he's kept pretty vague on purpose. It's kind of neat. Benicio del Toro, he goes through the script, he reads it, and he feels like he has a good understanding of what this character is and what his motivation is, and so he goes to Denis Villeneuve and he's like, "Hey, I think that I'm talking way too much in this film. It doesn't really make sense that this character would be so upfront about everything." There's a scene where they get into the Macer gets on the plane with Matt and Alejandro, and I guess in that scene, Alejandro was kind of supposed to explain kind of his character motivation, that his family had been killed and all this, and he's kind of out for revenge, and he's going to kind of take over this, kind of kingpin of the drug trade, and. So Benicio del Toro was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think he should do this. And so him and Denis Villeneuve worked on it, and they went through the script. Apparently Denis Villeneuve estimated that 90% of his dialogue is cut from the film,
Dang.
Wow.
which is amazing to me. And I really love that, because that to me is an example of a actor caring enough about a character and how it's portrayed on screen that they're willing to give up their own vanity to see that character portrayed well. Because, I think there's a lot of actors who are like, "Oh, you want to cut 90% of my dialogue out?" No, I'm out.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Of
But
course.
the fact that it was he
His
was the one who
decision.
prompted this. I
This
think
will
is
be
kinda
better
cool.
for the film, and not necessarily better for me. But I thought he did. Just his body language and facial expressions were just fantastic.
Yeah, that's what I have a note of. I think just his presence in the film, and the fact that he is mysterious, makes him much more intriguing. And he has kind of cryptic lines. Calvin has a really good quote by him.
Yeah, where he's talking about "Oh, you're asking me how a watch works. Or for now, we'll just keep an eye on the time."
And I love
Yeah.
that. It's
Yeah.
it keeps this kind of vagueness to his character that I think makes it much more compelling. And I think this film, to me, that's the version of this film where he talks 90% more is a Michael Bay version of this.
Yeah.
film,
Yeah.
where it's let's pump up how badass these guys are, and let's pump up the revenge, and let's go in there guns blazing all the time. I think this film could have been completely different if
It could have been
it's a different
freaking
direction.
terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just really appreciate Benicio del Toro for being like, hey, I have a different idea on what we can do with this. And again, I think we've talked about it before, about Denis Villeneuve being an auteur in a way, but someone who's still willing to kind of take notes and collaborate and figure out what actually makes this film better, instead of being like, I'm the boss, we're going to do it this way because I'm the director. I like that these stories always end up coming out better because of his willingness to listen and try and put his actors in the best situation to get the best performances.
Yeah, and with those lines too, like that's a fairly like cliche dumbass like let's create the mystique of a character by giving them weird lines like this. But what you ultimately realize by the end of the film is he talks like this because he just doesn't give a shit
about anything.
Yeah, like he's just
cares
like
about one thing and that's it.
yeah, like he can say things like this because it's all like this is just me at the office type thing, and like I'm just gonna talk goofy like this or like whatever. It doesn't mean anything to him. It's like not trying to be cool or mysterious. He's just trying to be himself and evade why he's actually really there. Like that's the purpose of it.
It's kind of like you talked about in Enemy, where there's a scene where Jake Gyllenhaal is meeting Helen, but he's supposed to act aloof, like he doesn't know who Helen is. It's like this sort of nonchalantness, and I think Benicio del Toro captures that with Alejandro. It's like I think it's like this kind of blase-blah attitude that I think is just it's put on screen really well, and I think that's why his character is interesting, even though he's aloof and even though he's vague.
Yeah.
It's interesting in like a clever way, not like this is our guy who's probably going to do something spectacular later, but we're keeping it secret because we just have to.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting that it's kept a secret in this film.
I think a good example of that is like when he starts to become more friendly with Macer and starts to like build a relationship with her almost. And because
he has this really odd, caring compassion for her. Like,
okay,
really odd, protective.
So for a moment, like I thought, like, is this sexual? And I was like, if it is, it's very fucking weird. Like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem right.
Yeah. Well,
and then it wasn't. Like,
yeah, I'm glad it didn't turn out to be that way. That would have been odd.
Yeah.
But yeah. So do we have some side characters we want to move on to?
I mean, we have like three main ones that I think are important. Obviously, Ted, fuckboy cowboy.
Right.
Like that was just kind of weird and fun, and like I just remember seeing him in The Walking Dead for the first time. So now wherever I see him,
I'm like, oh, that's Shane. You can't hide from me. That's exactly what I say every time.
Yeah. But yeah,
I kind of love his scenes because he kind of comes off as like this swagger cowboy, and then when he's kind of being tortured in the end by Alejandro, and he gets like it's sort of like a wet willy, but it's like a very painful wet willy, and then he becomes like he just is totally compliant after that. So this kind of switch on his character. I think it's kind of funny how that works. Like,
yeah, exactly.
All of his swagger is gone. Like
right, and yeah, like so, and then he's fun, and then Reg, played by Daniel Kaluuya, he's good.
I actually have some thoughts on him because there are two things. I talked about how I think almost everything this movie needs to be there. I think he doesn't need to be there, and I think there's a plot line with the police officer in Mexico, like the police officer from Juarez.
Oh, you don't think that needs to be there?
No, I don't.
Wow, I think that's huge.
We can get into that one.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Reggie, though. I think it kind of undermines this sense of kind of dread and anxiety that Macer has every time he shows up. I think it kind of resets this clock in my head of kind of tension building every time he pops in, because now she has like this sort of place of comfort that she can go to, like a partner that she knows, someone who has her back, where I think it would have, if you just kind of, because this film is kind of like a slow burn to like your kind of climax at the end. And I think if you just kept that slow burn of anxiety that Macer's feeling, I think it would have come across better than having kind of this kind of like relaxed moments with Reggie. So I actually prefer him not being in the film. I think it makes it less dynamic if he's in it.
I think the whole thing though would just be strained the whole time, and eventually that just it gets tiring to an audience, and so I'd imagine that's why he's included in there to give like a little bit of peaks and valleys of like this is likely what would happen in a real scenario. This person would be talking to someone. Like it's not about Macer. If it were about Macer and we were really talking about like her mind and her apprehension about doing all of this, that would make more sense. But I think here Reggie is meant to just be like a bouncing board for her ideas and for her anxieties, and we give her it's just a little bit of release of tension, so that when all of a sudden we find out that Ted is actually going to kill her or trying it. It feels more dangerous because of that. Yeah,
I guess that's fair. I guess just for me, like personally, like I would have liked the idea of a film where I'm uptight and I got my fingers I'm clenching my fists and I'm clenching my toes and I'm just like, oh my God, what is going to happen with Macer? Like, how is this going to go? And I thought every time Reggie came in, I had this kind of release, and I was like, well, now I have to like build back up to this tension again. And so that's just like personally for me. I would have been fine with Reggie not being in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he's very interesting. Or
Yeah.
anything like that.
I
But
think
do.
he is just a device to release tension in the film.
And that's
I think
all
for
it
sure,
is.
yeah.
And I don't think maybe cut him out of the movie completely, but he doesn't need to be there as much as he is. Because the best parts of the movie are with him not in the film.
Yeah, why he's going on the mission at the end, I don't understand.
Me either. I don't get that
That's
at all.
unnecessary. Like, I don't know why he just randomly got brought in.
I think it's odd too because Matt makes a point to be like, "Oh, no lawyers on
Yeah.
this op. Like, get him out of here."
Yeah.
Like he makes a point to not include him, so it's weird that he is included at the end. I don't know. I actually, that's another point I have. I actually think that kind of end scene in the tunnel is even more tense if Macer's going in there with literally no one who has her back.
Yeah.
Because they make it pretty clear to her going into that scene that like, hey, like you're here on it like for a technicality.
Yeah.
Like you're not here because we actually like your input or your skill is actually needed. You're here because we technically need you. And I think that whole scene becomes much more tense when she like finds herself alone in the tunnels. If it is just her alone, she has no one with her. So again, that's my thoughts on Reggie. I think he's fine. Can we talk about why do you guys think the police officer in Juarez is necessary?
I think he's incredibly
Definitely.
necessary. And I think it's not necessarily incredibly necessary to Benicio's character, and that's huge to me because it gives us. I mean, we have this relationship with him and his son, and then it's just. And freaking Alejandro doesn't care at the end. He's like, I have a son, whatever. And like he just blows it off, like does not give a single shit that he said that.
Yeah.
At all. And having that background with having his relationship with his son makes the audience more.
You found the death more impactful.
Yeah, it's more like
okay.
more empathetic towards him and his family and stuff.
Yeah,
like
because
that.
we know what kind of character Alejandro is now. Like he is so far beyond redemption because he doesn't even remember what happened to him. Everybody is just in his way and for his singular goal. And the reason I think that these scenes are necessary is because it reinforces the idea of the state of things. You know, like when Alejandro says, you know, beware of the state police. They're not always the good guys, foreshadowing of finding out that he's the police officer is actually drug running for them as well.
Right.
And so it's those scenes of this little family life, and families are obviously a big deal here, but tying in how one person connects everybody to the entire, how everything is tangled. And then at the end, when you have the soccer game and explosions are going off, it's because it's constant. Everybody's involved, whether they want to be or not. So that's why those are necessary. Not necessarily the character themselves. You don't need to give them a name or lines or anything. It's just showing that.
I think you're probably right. I think it adds more flavor to the film. It gives a little more kind of background on what they're going into. I just think that I guess narratively, you could have just had a police officer at the end loading in drugs. Just do a little throwaway line like, "Oh, come on, you're a cop. You work for us, though. Like, we got you under our thumb." And then Alejandro comes and kind of forces him to drive him places and do these things. I think narratively, it could work without that, all those kinds of scenes with him, with his son, and his family.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it adds more. You're right. I think it adds more context, more flavor to the film. But that's fine.
Yeah, but ultimately, the only side character that I think actually matters is Steve Forsing, and he's also like one of the bright spots in terms of humor.
Yeah,
that's the dude that when they get off the tarmac, they're what do they say? They asked him like,
"How you doing, Steve?"
Yeah, he's like my
pee hurts.
Yeah, my pee hurts. Something like.
Does it have what color is it? He's like, it's got little red specks in there. He's like, that's blood.
So, to me, I actually don't like that bit of dialogue, and that's from me and my military background. I think that's a bit of like, oh yeah, this is just military jargon. This is how these guys talk. You know, they always talking about, you know, all these gross things, but they're just like guys. You know, they're just guys being dudes.
Yeah.
And so I actually don't like that. That to me is like a stereotypical kind of jargon that takes place. So I actually wasn't a big fan of that, but I understand to like you soft brains, your smooth brains out there, you know, like you too. I think that's how military people talk.
Well,
that's like not a thing.
That's not necessarily why I think like I don't think that's necessarily like I think it's a stereotype of him. What I think it does is it introduces him as this type of character who's going to say these types of things. It's not necessarily our idea of someone running this operation. It's like what you can expect this type of character to say. Yeah. The lines that he has that are important are after that when he's talking about how Taft came came down to sign a treaty with 4,000 men, and
Right.
you know, not even that with 4,000.
He didn't even feel safe then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with 4,000 men, and then the other one, like when they drive by all of the people hanging on the underpass, and he says it's brilliant what they do. Make them cut them up like that, make them look like they deserved a death like that. Brilliant what they do, and
Yeah.
it's funny because in the end, that's also like. What Almacon says about how where we learned everything from was from the Americans. So you have this bit of interplay, like, well, we learned it from them. No, we learned it from them, because it's just constantly back and forth, and then just picking up tricks from each other.
Right. I think he's more flavor to the film than substance to the film.
Yeah,
to me.
like he embodies some of these things, these attitudes towards what's going on. It's all about like, yeah, this is just another. It's just another thing, you know. It's not. We're not talking about a specific event or a specific engagement.
It's just another day in their lives.
Yeah, just another
And
day
I think
in the
that
office.
it does kind of represent that. And like,
yeah,
I love that too when they have the kind of the briefing that they're gonna go across the border.
Yeah.
And Macer's in there. She seems like this is somehow it's like old hat to these guys. Like they know what they're doing, and she's the only one who's kind of left in the dark. It's just like kind of more of that building up. It's like it's the briefest brief ever given. I've been in briefs; they're really long.
Yeah.
And everyone needs to know what's going on before you step out the door. And she still seems to have nothing, like no idea, kind of what they're really doing. And everyone's just like, oh yeah, no, we're. You know, and they're like, oh, we got Matt here, and he's like, oh yeah, like hopefully I'll be sober before I cross the border.
Yeah.
You know, and everyone's like kind of coking and joking in there, and I think it just adds to like kind of this feeling that Macer has in there of like these guys are just like gung ho cowboys out there.
Yeah.
And she's like, this is not how I do things, because she's like FBI by the book.
Yeah.
And I think it adds more of that element to her character. Again, I don't think her acting is kind of what elevates that character. I think it's just the situation she's in that kind of make the character more interesting. Yeah, I do like that. It's like this weird like kind of frat boy kind of fraternity of dudes who are like, oh yeah, we're just gonna go across the border, and you know, if guns come out, it's no big deal. And she's like, what the fuck are we doing here? And I love that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so much tension in like a scene about driving somewhere.
Yeah.
It's a lot of tension in that scene. I like it. I think that scene really builds into the atmosphere of the film, like kind of the film techniques we're going to be seeing, the environment we're going to be a part of, and I think it kind of leads into that really well.
Yeah, and I'd say that everything actually works together to create this cryptic trudge of violence. It's like a state, and like I said before, it's a state. It's not an event. It's not a specific engagement. It's a state of war for the U.S. It's a state of tragedy for the people of Juarez. Nothing is new or different, and the government wants to get back to the Medellin status quo where they control like a single cartel, but they're doing it through acts of terror. It's literally bureaucratic chaos, which is so weird to think about. Like in this case, like we really are a part of the problem.
Doesn't Matt say that? He's like, we're going in there to kick the hornet's nest. Like that's
And
like
create
their goal.
chaos. He literally
Create
says that, yeah.
Yeah, which is it's weird and unfortunate that that's probably the case. I mean, that's obviously been the case in a lot of involvement that the U.S. has had in like southern and middle American countries, like destabilizing governments specifically.
It's not a secret that the U.S. is involved in like how politics are done or influencing politics and other.
Yeah, well, not even like politics, but like straight up guerrilla warfare.
Right, right.
Yep.
Supporting coups and
Right.
so that they can control things better. So it's weird to get like a glimpse of that, like
In film.
yeah, well, not necessarily in film, but that it's just like this is just what's going on. Like there's nothing. It's not corrupt. It's just what are we gonna do? We're just this is just our job.
I think that's one of the reasons why I think this film is probably elevated, is because it is done in a way that's believable. It's subtle how they're going about destabilizing a cartel and a government and all this. It seems like something that's probably actually happening, instead of like, we're gonna go in there and we're gonna drop the bombs and we're gonna shoot everyone and we're badass, we're America and let's do it. Like I like that it's like
Just another day at the office.
yeah, and it's just like, this is just how we do things now. Like we do things kind of in the shadows. We manipulate people and we are brutal in a way, but it's kept secret. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like this film a lot, is because you described it, Calvin, I think it's like you don't like war movies and shoot 'em up movies. Mm-hmm. I don't really think this is that.
I don't think it is either. That was my idea of like what it would be going
Right,
in.
right. And I'm glad it's not, because that would suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and I think like the things that really take it beyond even just what's going on in terms of Macer's perspective is it's the camera work here. You can really see Denis how he influences the this idea of state of things through his camera work. You know, you have some of my favorite shots. You have like when Macer first gets dropped off at the complex, and you know, they don't let Reg in. You cut out, and it's this wide shot of her just standing at the gate by herself. There's another conference room where it cuts out, and she's just very small in the frame. She's very small and isolated in different shots, like lending to the idea of this surrounding chaos around her, and she's just, you know, not going to be able to make a mark, not significant, and completely alone. And then you have the handheld shots of them going through like the raid at the beginning. You know, it's that boots on ground, like here we are, like we're the perspective. But it's
I
not
love
like
that scene.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk about that, but that's a really good way to start out a movie, I think. And really you're immediately involved, and you feel the impact of like, this is what this cartel is capable of. All this like this disturbing imagery you see, like with people in the walls, and then you see kind of like booby trap bomb stuff, and it's to see it north of the border in one of the states is like, it's jarring and it's unsettling. And I think I really like the beginning of this film because it does jump right into action, but it like really sets the stage for what they're dealing with.
Yeah, and also there's a dog in that scene, and the dog does not die in the explosion. So that made me happy.
Oh, okay.
I was very worried about it.
Yeah. You probably should have died just to reinforce how everyone's involved.
I would have been so sad.
And that's the point.
Yeah.
But then I was happy because the dog was just skirts away from the explosion.
But yeah, so I love how we start with these handheld shots. We start with you know, it's not shaky cam as much, you know, and shaky cam has a complicated history in film history. Like you go, like there are different ideas of direct cinema and cinema verite, and idea of like, and how that bleeds over into like documentary film as well. This idea of the camera being a real person, of being an individual perspective. So to start there and then move to these amazing aerial shots, I think this is one of the hallmarks of his film. Like you saw it a little bit in Enemy, not in Prisoners at all. But then
this film is lousy with aerial shots. It's amazing.
And they are wonderful because they're not exposition shots either. That is what I think is so crazy. It's not like, okay, here we're in Juarez, you know, title screen, like, you know, it's not like Budapest, like, you know, the Black Widow did, and like that's not the point of it. My favorite
those shots are just to like kind of aerial shots to an establishing shot to tell you where you're at. These are like a part of the scene.
Yeah, it's the single greatest aspect of the film. Like when the switching of the perspective to the sky from the ground changes the film by incorporating the environment into the action. It becomes anthropomorphized and entangled in the story. You actually think of it as like a character, or embodying qualities of like danger. Like when the caravan crosses the border and the frame starts to get ahead of the camera, or I mean ahead of the caravan, we start to see the whole city, and it lingers.
In the business we call it convoy, but
yeah, okay, there we go. In my business we call it other things.
But even prior to that, I there's a really great shot of as the convoy is just even approaching the border, and the shot is kind of helicopters flying over the shot, and it's at the border. They're driving past the fence, and that's like another part of kind of the feel of this film is like the score picks up, and it's just like this really like kind of like bassy tone that keeps picking up. And it's as they're getting closer to the border, and it gets louder and louder, and it builds this tension of them going across. And I just love that it's like, it's literally you see like Juarez on one side, and then you kind of see this convoy on the other, and you know that they're about to head into this conflict. And then you know that's when you're talking about where the aerial shot gets higher up, and you see the convoy crossing the border.
And what's so great is how it stays there. We stay looking at Juarez for like 5 or 6 seconds longer than you would expect that shot to last. And you start to think, and when those happen, then you suddenly don't think of them as plot points or anything like that. It's like, why are we still looking at this? You get this sense of like what's going on. And it's the same sort of thing that happens when you look at the traffic jam. We start not at the beginning where the crash is. We start somewhere in the middle, and we see all of these cars. It builds tension so well because we don't know when the resolution is. We don't know how far away it is, but we see a massive problem.
I agree with what you're saying, where the camera kind of lingers on Juarez for a little bit. I think one of them says, he's like, that there it is, that's the beast. And that's, to me, I think it's the filmmaking technique enhancing a bit of dialogue that we're saying, because it lingers for a bit, and then you get like, hey, you get confirmation on like, here, we're going in here. And I love that. It's those two bits of filmmaking working together. It's the actual, what you're seeing on film, on screen, and it's dialogue that helps enhance all that. I think it's great.
Yeah, exactly. In the hands of a lesser director, this would be another one of your drug war movies that's straight to video.
Right.
The way he treats the camera is such a big deal that these characters, even if you have Josh Brolin and Emily Blunt, like, this is a 4 out of 10 star movie. It will be terrible. It doesn't matter, because they don't understand what they're making, and he does.
So I want to, continuing into that scene, so they're crossing the border. They're going to pick up someone that they think they can kind of become an informant for them. And I again, we're talking about the aerial shots, and I think what's really cool about that is, as they're entering the border, you have these great aerial shots, and then the further they get into Juarez, kind of the closer to like ground level you get. And I think that's interesting, because it's sort of like this sort of like sense of safety at the border. And, so you have your camera placed up high, like you're out of danger. You're away from, this, anything that could happen to you. And then the further they get in, the more camera angles are at street level, and it sort of everything is kind of closing in around them. They have all the buildings coming in close. You're on these like small roads. And that, to me, enhances kind of the danger that they're in. And I think the filmmaking, again, you're talking about being kind of an element of the story. I think it enhances that all. Because if you just keep it all aerial shots, or if you start it all just like cameras that are in the vehicles right off the bat, then you don't really get that sense. It's kind of this feeling of going from like kind of safety into danger. And I think the filmmaking itself, the camera techniques itself, enhance that.
Yeah, because it's actually like, now that I think about it, it's really a reflection of the idea of the hero descending into the underworld.
Right.
A visual representation of that you get, that you subconsciously put together, but that you don't necessarily need to be told that, like, oh, we're that we're heroes diving down into the underworld. Like, actually being told that is pathetic and dumb, but knowing that that's what you're doing with your filmmaking is exactly why it works.
What I'm saying. Yeah, there's like no dialogue to be like, okay, we're in the dangerous spot now. It's just the filmmaking technique. It's just changing what
he does literally say that we're entering the beast now.
Well, no, he says like there's the beast over there or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do love, like you mentioned, how the music picks up in certain places, but it's very minimalistic. It's not your typical bombastic score that you would expect for a genre film like this. It's driving and undulating without making itself known. Like, it
works very well.
Yeah,
this is Jaden's favorite kind of score.
Yep. I love it a lot.
Yeah, it's great.
Big fan of it in this movie, especially. I think it works really well, and it does it. Like you were saying with the aerial shots, and it drives the danger of where they're coming in. The score does the exact same thing.
Yeah, I agree. And so after they pick up their informant, they're going to cross back onto the U.S. side of the border. And there's a couple aerial shots, but they're not as heavy. It's mostly takes place, again, at like ground level, like you talked about the traffic jam. And so they're all kind of waiting. There's a lot of tension. Like they know there's people following them. They think they're going to run into a confrontation. Of course they do. And I think what's interesting about this is it's almost like your U.S. convoy who's picked up these guys. They almost like kind of not only do they welcome this like shootout, I feel like they almost kind of push it in a way.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think they are wanting this to happen.
Yeah, which is
like, it's been too boring today. Let's get some action in here, boys.
Which is another reason, like, I think Emily Blunt's portrayal of Macer is so great, because she's just like, as soon as they get out of the car, and she's like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, she's like, this is not.
I think she might literally say that.
Yeah. I think that is a quote from the movie.
Yeah.
And that shot, actually, when they get back to the complex and they both get out of the car, it's a long shot where it's a really wide angle, and she's just laying into Matt, and it goes on for like a minute. And normally, like, when you would see that type of framing, that's typically a comedy type setting, because when you put characters far away in the frame, it increases the humor, because it's very like, this is not a big deal, this is blah blah blah, humans, whatever. But it feels like it just reinforces how small she is and how little she can actually affect anything. And the same sort of thing with Matt. Like, he is small and can't really affect anything because he is framed by this big, wide open mess.
Yeah. And I think it's too. I think you get a good bit of like physical acting from Emily Blunt in that scene, because she's like, she's like pointing at Matt. She's like, "What are we doing? Like, what? We can't do that." She's like, "I don't trust Alejandro. Like, he's not supposed to be here."
Yeah.
And I think because it's in a wider shot, you can get more of like, you can get that, if it was like a 2-camera setup where it's just cutting between Josh Brolin and Emily Blunt, you don't get that same feeling at all. I like that it's a wide shot, and you can see them, like Macer's kind of pacing around, like kind of trying to come to grips with this shootout they just had at the border. Like, it's I think it's, again, it's a well done scene where I think if you do a more traditional version of that, it's going to be edited them talking back and forth to each other, and I don't think it's as good. So I do like that it's this, like you said, a wide shot. I think it comes out great.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Completely, because you do, and like with that wide shot, you get a lot of the body language, which you wouldn't get.
That physical acting I'm talking about.
You need that, and I think it helps the scene out dramatically.
And it helps Matt, like Matt too. He's like, whatever, dude, fine.
Yeah.
He's like, leave if you want. He's like, don't come with us if you want. I don't care.
He's like I got a job to do. Yeah.
He has that same body language. He's just like, he's just a dude. He's like, okay, whatever.
He could be wearing flip flops in that scene and be totally fine.
Yeah. It would make perfect sense.
Yeah. Whether or not I'm wearing a shirt is fine with me.
Yeah. I like that. That border crossing scene, them entering and then exiting, I think are kind of your really high tension moments in the movie. I think they're done really well.
Yeah, it really is the movie when you think about it. Like the only other thing like where we ever get back to that is the dinner scene at the end when Alejandro does infiltrate Fausto's home.
Right.
That scene is intense, dude.
And I'm sort of starting to come around to what you guys had to say about the police officer in Juarez and how Alejandro uses him to he kind of pulls over one of kind of the second or third in commands of the cartel, and he uses him to
Mando.
to get into the compound and everything to kind of reach your climax of the film. And I guess you're right. I guess I don't feel enough when he dies because I just already didn't I wasn't very interested in that sort of that B plot of this film.
Yeah.
But I guess just to kind of add more emotion to the film, it does help that he has that background.
So it makes you feel like because you as the viewer are probably gonna have empathy for that guy.
Yeah.
Immediately, and then it just shows the apatheticness of Alejandro. He just uses him literally as a tool to pull this guy over.
Yeah.
That's all he's there for.
And I think Calvin had mentioned too, it sets up his character even more to be like, these are just people, these are just obstacles in my way.
Yep.
It doesn't matter that this guy has a family.
No, it doesn't matter at all.
It doesn't matter that he seems to even have a drinking problem, probably induced because he has to work for their cartel. And he's probably seems like maybe an honest man who doesn't want to be doing this. So
eats good breakfasts.
So I'm maybe coming around on that. You guys might have convinced me that kind of plot within the film helps it out.
And it's not even necessarily a plot because it's also one of the first questions that Macer was asked. Are you married? Kids?
Yeah.
And then so that theme is everywhere. Same thing when they're coming through some of the illegal aliens. Yeah. Do you have family on this side of the border? Yeah. Kids. And it's that idea repeated over and over. And then here you have a visual representation. You knew that he was going to die because the whole thing is a single actor in this mess ties all of his connections in whether he likes it or not.
Right.
Yeah. So
can we talk about just real quick leading up just prior to that dinner scene is when they go through the tunnel that's going to get them across the border and you have that kind of special op thing that takes place.
Yeah.
This is just one of my fun facts. When they're in the tunnel, there's a scene where Emily Blunt hits her head on kind of one of the wood beams.
Yeah.
And after that, she takes her helmet off and buckles it onto her side. That was not intentional. She actually bumped her head,
and she's like, "I freaking hate this thing."
Denis Villeneuve was like, "Oh, that actually kind of makes sense that they're in this confined space now. It actually makes sense in that moment in the film that she would. Oh, I'm like bonking my head. I would take this off. I just think it's always neat when you get those scenes that are just like it reminds you of the Gandalf scene where he hits his head in Bilbo's house.
Yeah.
And they just kept it in because they're like, oh, that makes sense. We should keep it.
Yep.
Yeah, that scene actually, that part bugged me because, working in construction, well, if you hit your head once while you're wearing your helmet, why would you take it off?
And then keep it and keep going.
And I understand a director saying that it makes sense because, again, I'm going to bring my military background into it. And again, I wasn't a cool guy. I didn't do anything. I deployed to Dubai and Bahrain, and I lived in a hotel, and I got to go to the beach all the time. So my military experience is much different than what these guys in this film have. But I do know that if you are even a chance that a bullet might come at you, you just keep your helmet on.
Yeah.
So I get that for a filmmaker to be like, oh, this is kind of a cool little bit. I'll keep it in my film. I get that that's cool and it's cinematic. Yeah. But I also agree with Calvin. If you're keep it on. Keep your helmet on.
Well, I kind of thought
It's
at the same time, like I mean, you might not be wearing that kind of equipment all the time. But then again, is she wearing a helmet in the beginning of the
Yeah,
movie?
yeah.
And she also takes it off pretty quickly.
Yeah, she takes
Did
it off
she?
after they're done.
Yeah.
She has it off during the explosion, but they're not
Yeah,
expecting
that
the
makes sense.
explosion.
She does this sweet like slide shoot move in that scene too.
Yeah, it is cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, but so the whole, and again, like when the dinner scene is another example of family represented as their set pieces. The cameras are set up behind the shoulders of Alarcon and Alejandro. They're not from the perspectives of the family. They're literally obstacles to getting to Fausto.
Right.
So that's why, like,
I don't know if they're
Lazy.
obstacles in that point. I think they might be like leverage. Or...
well, the same sort of thing. Like either way, they're set up between Alejandro and Fausto as being things that would prevent him from acting a certain way, which is why they're speaking in
okay, I
English.
see what you're saying. Okay, yep.
Yeah, so not necessarily like preventing him from doing that, but like a psychic level of like, oh, you know, how bad of a person is he?
Yeah, they should be obstacles.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
But
And-
they're not.
Yeah, exactly. And so that whole, you know, he walks up, there's no sound, there's no music, and we don't know how this is necessarily going to play out. We do think that Alarcon is going to get killed. Like that seems pretty obvious. But
especially since he starts like you guys speaking English now, you think that the kids and stuff might be
Yeah.
safe.
I actually
Yeah.
think that that's a clever way to get an American audience to be more interested in this film because people don't want to read subtitles. And so
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
that he was like, do your kids speak English? And they're like, no. It's like, okay, so we can just speak English in this. That way the American viewer
Oh.
can have a better time watching this.
I just have subtitles
that's what
on the
I
whole
thought.
time either way. So.
yeah,
Dude,
right.
you guys drive me nuts with your subtitles. I don't understand how you can watch a film with
I don't understand how
subtitles.
you can.
yeah, you miss so
You
much.
miss so much.
No,
yeah.
I just listen to it or I watch it again. Or I tend to rewind films. Hannah doesn't like it.
Yeah, you should put on subtitles.
Because I'll be like, wait, what happened? And I'll have to rewind it and listen to it again. But to me, that's a more enjoyable way to watch a movie because I feel like I miss out on what's going on screen if I'm reading what's at the bottom.
Okay, so like I don't just read the subtitles like the entire movie. Like,
I'm
like,
a slow-
okay, I
yeah.
missed something, and then I'll check it.
I'm a slow reader, so and I get so drawn into the subtitles. Like
Yeah.
that to me is somehow more. It grabs my attention more than what's happening on screen.
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
end up just reading the whole thing like some kind of visual novel.
Yeah,
That's awful.
And I
hate
could
it.
get that, but I think the two, like, I don't watch a film one time if it's good. You know, I'm going back and I'm watching it 2 and 3 times.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's that level of it too. I just prefer. I don't want to misconstrue something that's been said, and I also do like there are times in a mix because the mix is not perfect for every place that you're going to be watching it. So sometimes those sounds don't come in because they're on a different channel, and so when you have the subtitle talking about a sound effect that's way off, I think those are the biggest reasons that I still leave on.
Your points are
subtitles.
fair. I'm just saying I personally cannot stand it.
I know. We're working on converting you. This is just another.
So another part of the dinner scene, there's they have like I assume like some kind of predator drone or something overhead, and they're feeding information to Alejandro as he's moving through the house, and they tell him they're like, okay, 6 people in the compound or whatever, and you see him, he doesn't kind of kill, he kills one of the henchmen.
Just kind of kills
he
it.
like absolutely murders him. And then after that you see him, he becomes like a lot less like sneaky, and he's like not as aggressively moving through the house. He's like much more relaxed because he then sees like the maid or like you know, someone who works for the family.
Which is crazy that he doesn't just murder her.
I actually kind of like that he like tells her to get out.
Yeah, I think that.
Like,
I think
he
that.
like murders everybody else. Like, what is the difference here?
I think that actually adds to the tension in the end because like okay, he's a good guy. He's not going to kill innocent people. You know.
But who the fuck is innocent?
Well,
like who?
But the cop's
Right.
not innocent. Like so he kills him, and it's
Well, how is the maid innocent if the
Well, but I
cop's
guess
not
the- I
innocent?
guess
Because
the kids
the
aren't-
maid is still working for the cartel,
Yeah, but it's
correct?
not. Yeah. I would say. Well, I mean, like maybe not.
and the
necessarily
cop
working
didn't
for
choose to work for the cartel.
I mean,
I assume.
yeah, I mean
That's interesting that you bring it up because
Yeah.
now I'm thinking about it differently. It might have made more sense for his character to actually kill
Just
her.
freaking
because-
blow her brains. I was confused as why he did
Yeah,
it.
I don't think it makes sense to the character. I think it just adds to the gravity of
Yeah.
the situation
Yeah.
at the dinner
Yeah.
table.
I just think it's cool.
It does, and it makes the scene at the dinner table, I guess, more confusing because if he's not going to kill the maid, why would he kill the kids?
Yeah.
I just think it's cool that
his
his body language changes after he knows he's gotten rid of.
Yeah,
the one
immediately.
hit.
Yeah,
And I think it's kind of a neat bit. He's like, okay, now I just need to go take care of the big guy.
He's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, and I love that. Like, I just that was the one thing I did not see coming was the way he killed the family. It was just like punching numbers.
It's so nothing to him. Like
pop, pop, pop. Yeah, not a flinch, not hardly a glance at any of them, and it just goes to reinforce like he's probably done way worse.
It's the thing is, I think he's mentally torturing the guy at this point by not only coming in and like he's gonna kill his family, like that's part of it. Before he dies, he's like, I want you to suffer like the most you ever have before this happens, but also by toying with him and making him think that maybe he won't kill his family by like, hey, let's speak in English, keep eating your food, everything's fine. Like,
but it just reinforces that the idea of redemption has so far elapsed for this character. There's no coming back from him.
No, he has like zero redeemable qualities. This guy, which again is kind of what's odd about him because he does seem to have this weird like caring paternal instinct for Macer. Which is odd because it. Like,
it was a reflection of his
daughter, yeah,
and which was the ultimate goal was
right.
revenge for that. But yeah, I do see what you mean there. But yeah, that's why I just found that amazing because you just didn't see that coming. Like you didn't realize that was what was the end was going to be. Was there is no coming back. There is nothing good about any of this, and all of us are terrible.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I do like that. I keep saying I like it. I don't like that he kills the kids. I'm just saying it seems to it seems to fit the character and it seems to fit the tone of the film, and so I like that they didn't try to redeem this character in any way, like you said. I think that it all works really well. Do we have problems with this film?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, not
Elaborate.
Not many, but I have some.
I mean, the thing for me is like the ambiguity of the perspective is what makes the film it is, but it's also what holds it back. Like it can't rise above its own implausibility. Like it doesn't offer wider social critiques or symbolic motifs that could add depth. Like the point of the film is the state of things. It's the atmosphere is the story. The atmosphere is the film, not the story. And what I mean by its implausibility is like I know it's a technicality that she has to be there, but just one whole meeting would be perfect. The fact that we could tell her like, oh yeah, you need to be doing this because this could happen here. That's all. Like minor things that could add to my suspension of disbelief. That were
right.
There were too many of those that I felt like we needed to unsettle the audience and make them not understand what's going on by doing all of these things. I didn't think it needed all of them.
Do you have anything, Jaden?
Not a whole lot. So I thought just some of the characters were kind of dry. I wasn't a big fan of Reg in the movie at all.
Yeah.
Other than that, I mean, I liked the movie a lot. So.
Yeah, I think I've talked about Reggie's probably a part of the movie I don't like just because like for me personally I think the tension would build and it would keep you'd be kind of like trapped in this tension if he was never there.
Yeah.
And I like a film that would kind of explore that and do that to you. It's like there's no outlet for this character, for Macer. And then I talked about the police officer already, which you guys kind of changed my mind on. But those would be like the two critiques I have on this. Again, I think this is a tight script.
Yeah, also cigarette smoking.
And I think it's executed so well. It's not a movie that's gonna make you think. You don't have to go to bed and be like, oh man, I'm being kept awake by this film. Like there's so many thoughts going through my head. It's not like that. It doesn't need to be that. I think everything that's in this film needs to be there. And I think if you add more, it would actually decrease how much I like this film. So yeah, I don't have a ton of problems either. Nope. It's tight. It's this tight.
Yeah, it's
film.
minimalist film almost, and
Yeah.
I do enjoy that about it.
Yeah. What do we want to rate it in? Unlit cigarettes.
Yeah. Okay, I like that.
Give us like a 7.8.
7.8.
I think it's very good. But once again, it does fall. It gets hindered just because it's like that genre style of movie. Like it's a very well done drug movie, but it's still a drug movie.
Yeah, I see what you mean there. And yeah, so I think they're just the idea that the entire film is represented entirely in one shot of that caravan. And what I mean by that is you have everything there. It's the state of things, it's the direct mood, it's this great aesthetic. All of those things being represented in one shot is so difficult to do as a creator. There are bonus points there for it. So for me, it's gonna be a 6.9 out of 10. Yeah. So it's just good. But like I was saying, there's not extra depth there to mine.
Yeah, and you were talking about how kind of the atmosphere is what makes this film. I think a big part of that is the cinematography. Roger Deakins did the cinematography for this, and he's done stuff he's been a cinematographer forever, but some of his more recent things be 1917, Blade Runner 2049, No Country for Old Men, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which is actually kind of older.
It's a good movie.
At least for my age, I'm not it's older to me.
Was it 90s or was it 2000?
It was early 2000.
Yeah, I thought it was early 2000s.
What's interesting
about, as they called them.
Yeah, which is odd. I don't love that term.
Well, it is what it is.
I think there was Josh Brolin wasn't originally going to be in this film, and Roger Deakins actually, because he just finished filming that Everest movie Josh Brolin did. He was just exhausted from it, and Roger Deakins actually reached out to him and was like, "You have to be in this movie." Which I think is cool. Again, I think that's kind of the clout and kind of prestige that Denis Villeneuve have. He's like, you got to be in one of his films. It's going to be good. Mm-hmm. And so apparently that's really out of character for Roger Deakins. He doesn't reach out to people and tell them to do things, or ask them to do things. So that was just another fun fact I had.
Neat.
I think if I had to rate this, I give it a 7. And because I gave it a 7, I have to retroactively change my grade of Prisoners. Because I think Prisoners is better than this movie.
Really?
And
wow, I do not think that.
I do not think that.
Again, I think the performances of Prisoners I love, and that carry that film to me. And I think because the performances are not anything they're not special in this. There's nothing that I really find entirely compelling by, and I don't think any of the actors are phoning it in. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think that there's not a lot to these characters, which is fine because that's not the point of this film. Is the characters and their development is not really the point. So I just want to say a 7 for Sicario, retroactively changing Prisoners to 7.5 because I do like Prisoners better than this. I think I just needed more context of other Denis Villeneuve films to kind of.
You haven't watched Polytechnique or Incendies?
No, I told you we're only doing English-speaking films.
This was half of it was in Spanish.
It's not half. It's not half. It's not half. Yeah, I think. I think 7 is where I'm gonna leave this one.
I'm surprised that you think The Prisoners is better than this.
Yeah, I do too. Debate more later.
Well, I think with that, I'm your host Connor. I have my co-host Jaden and former guest Calvin.
Thanks for having me back.
And we're wrapping this one up. Thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.
I love how this is.
Yo voy a cantar esta canción para mi gente.